All right, everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium for Thursday, August 7th, 2014. And I have a really interesting article that is authored by a gentleman named Chris Cook, a former director of the International Petroleum Exchange and now a strategic market consultant and entrepreneur and commentator. And this article appeared in the Asia Times. And it's about what I blogged about last week, talking about Chancellor Merkel and President Putin apparently negotiating their own bilateral arrangement vis-a-vis the Ukraine and the Crimea. And I want you to listen very carefully to what this gentleman says in this article, because he makes 2 points that I think are very, very crucial, and I think that he's right on the money here with his analysis about what he thinks is happening. I'm only going to add a little bit of commentary to this at the end. And I'm going to read about 7 paragraphs from this article. I'll link the article for you because it's very well worth reading. It starts out and says this, quote, "In relation to the Ukraine, there are 2 key factors to consider. Firstly, the U.S. is in no position to intervene militarily. Secondly, the trusting relationship between Chancellor Merkel and the U.S. was terminally destroyed by the Snowden and subsequent U.S. spying revelations." Now, I hope you caught this because I've been arguing much the same thing. That revelation is a long-term thing. In other words, it's not just going to affect Chancellor and Merkel's government, but all subsequent chancellors in Germany. So that's a huge strategic blowback from that affair. Next paragraph, quote, "As a result, Germany is now both politically willing and economically able to pursue its own energy diplomacy on whatever terms Merkel sees fit." And again, that's a huge statement, folks, because what he's really saying there is that Germany is going to pursue and start pursuing its own geopolitical agenda, free of any interference from London or Washington, or for that matter, even the rest of Europe. Quote, "The Crimea is ethnically Russian. It was the subject of an internal transfer to the Ukraine within the USSR by Khrushchev, and whatever the US and UK choose to make of it, Merkel is quite prepared to cede it to Russia in exchange for suitable guarantees." And again, that's all true. Now let's go to the end of this article here, because there are some paragraphs that are very, very significant, and I hope you're listening carefully. Quote, "The enabling financing and funding for all of these energy deals that Russia is working out, not only with Eastern Europe but with China, comes not from conventional equity and debt finance capital." Let me read that again. "The enabling financing and funding comes not from conventional equity and debt finance capital." In other words, you're looking at a new financial arrangement being put into place, "which are useless where the rule of law is weak, but rather from the use of prepay credit instruments issued by suppliers like Gazprom and returnable in payment for natural gas supplied." In other words, you buy ahead of time and they take it off your account. You pay in terms of credit instruments, not debit instruments. It's cash and carry, folks. "Through this simple but radical mechanism, which has already been the subject of a direct United States dollars $85 billion crude oil transaction between Russia's Rosneft and China's Sinochem, it is possible for producers to financially engage directly with end user customers." In other words, stop and consider what that means. Is another mechanism is being put into place, prepay, that is not dollar based. Okay? Stick that in the back of your mind, because now, in the context of Chancellor Merkel talking with President Putin, this is going to take on extreme, huge significance. Quote, this then opens the way, firstly, to networked Eurasian physical energy markets and pricing hub benchmarks, and secondly, to a financial energy clearing union agreement, whereby energy producers and consumers engage in mutually guaranteed generic energy and value exchanges. Value exchanges. Now, folks, what this means, if I can put it in very crude terms, is that Russia is monetizing its energy. In other words, it's monetizing its production. It's not monetizing debt. That's huge. Okay? Now, at the very last paragraph of this very interesting article, I mean, I sat here kind of stunned reading all of this, because this gentleman is picking up on the very same sorts of indicators that I've been suggesting for 2 or 3 years vis-a-vis Germany's very difficult geopolitical position, sandwiched as it is between the East and the West, being a part of a military alliance that's predominantly West, but conducting trade and getting energy primarily with the East. All right. And now we're seeing more independence from Chancellor and Merkel vis-a-vis the East and vis-a-vis American policy in the Ukraine. All right. Now, the final paragraph here is the real bombshell, among many other bombshells in this very thought-provoking article. He states, quote, there is no reason such a unit of account must necessarily be the dollar, and Chancellor Merkel would appreciate the possibility of euro pricing, unquote. Now, folks, that's the next shoe to fall. That's the next boot to drop. Because what you're seeing here, first of all, is putting into place mechanisms of energy clearing exchanges, as he suggests, with these types of bilateral talks. And as we've been noting, the BRICS nations have been using and negotiating bilateral currency deals. In other words, they're accepting other currencies as the unit of account for these deals. And there's no reason, therefore, for them to prohibit the use of the euro as a unit of account. Now, stop and consider, that would make a bit of a coup for the troubled euro to have it as a unit of account in these types of bilateral bilateral energy agreements. And it would significantly strengthen Germany's hands, once again, not only in the European Union, but in negotiating these types of deals with Russia and other members of the BRICS bloc. There's only one point, really, in this entire article that I would dispute, and that is his analysis that the United States is incapable of intervening in any significant way militarily in the Ukraine. Now, he may mean by that it may not be in the geopolitical interest to do so. Or he may mean that we simply lack the capability. And if it's the latter, then I would strongly disagree. We certainly could intervene militarily in the Ukraine if we chose. If we did, I think it would only strengthen these negotiations taking place between Chancellor and Merkel and President Putin. Now, here comes the interesting part about this article. If they are successful in working out the details of this type of arrangement, then, as we've suggested, this isn't the first article talking about this. Zero Hedge talked about it. I've blogged about this just as recently as a week ago. But if they're successful in negotiating these details, then Germany has to turn around and sell it to the United States. That's going to be a much harder sell, obviously. And most likely, as I indicated in the previous blog, this means that the United States, probably Great Britain, would veto any such deal. But here's the problem. If the veto comes down, Then that passes the ball back into Chancellor Merkel's court. And what does she do? Now, she can cave into pressure from Washington and London, which she might do. Or she could simply say, we recognize, and this is so crucial, folks, because there's a historical precedent for this. We recognize the current status of the Crimean as an oblast within the Russian, as a province within the Russian Federation. She could simply announce this unilaterally, that Germany recognizes those borders and that status of the Crimea. Now, this wouldn't be the first time in history, in recent history, that Germany has acted more or less unilaterally, because if you recall the crack up of Yugoslavia, it wasn't Washington, it wasn't London, it wasn't Moscow, it wasn't Paris that recognized the Croatian breakaway republic that had been formed and established in Zagreb. It was Germany that did this. And by taking that unilateral action as being the first major power to recognize diplomatically the status of a changed internal status, let's say, in the former Yugoslavia, that the crack up of Yugoslavia proceeded apace. And Germany ended up kind of dragging the rest of the West with it. If that happens, if Germany does this, then you're going to likely see France, Italy, the other major European countries, Spain, and so on, following suit rather quickly. And that's going to put the ball and pressure firmly back in Washington's field. So this is a story to watch. If this develops, it's going to be interesting if if this negotiation is actually successful and Washington vetoes the deal, then it's going to be very interesting to watch what Germany does in the form of Chancellor Merkel and her government. But I think he's nailing it here, folks. We need to watch for the development of two more things. Energy clearing exchanges based on prepaid credit arrangements, and watch the units of account that these arrangements are going to be in. They're not going to be denominated in dollars, but if the euro all of a sudden becomes acceptable as a unit of account to Russia, then the euro is going to become acceptable, I guarantee you, as a unit of account with Germany's trade with the other BRICS blocs. And that is only going to accelerate the long-term game or unfolding agenda that I think has been going on in Germany's case and with the BRICS bloc, that Germany's slowly going to pull itself away from the Western entangling alliances and into the BRICS bloc. This is a huge story, and this is a wonderful article, so I'm going to link it for you. We do have a members vid chat tomorrow night for everybody, so I hope to see everybody there. We've got a new international audience. We've got an audience all the way from Greece, Italy, Spain, Belgium, Norway, Mexico, Indonesia, Australia, Canada. So we're getting quite an interesting international audience, and those of you who are thinking about becoming members, do become members. Join us on the website for these fascinating discussions. It's very interesting to see the perspectives that everybody brings from their region to these discussions. Anyway, that's it for today's news and views. We'll see you on the flip side, everybody. God bless.